So, welcome everyone. I'm very happy to have Martin, Olaf, and Julia here, and it's about inner development goals. And please introduce yourself and what everything is all about today and what will be planned after.
Okay. If it's okay, I just start. My name is Martin Heil. I'm living in Bonn. I'm an organizational developer, coach, and Gestalt therapist, and happened to encounter the inner development goals a couple of years ago when working with students, and we did a project on them, funded by the Ministry of Science in North Rhine-Westphalia, and I will talk a little bit on that and on our approach to the inner development goals later on.
Olaf?
Hello, everyone. I'm Olaf. I'm living in Cologne. I'm a body psychotherapist and clinical psychologist. I do research too on focusing, which is an approach within humanist psychology. And I stumbled upon the inner development goals through Martin and his dear colleague Brigitte, who did a training for train the trainer program, where I happened to participate. And after that, I started to implement the inner development goals into my work too. And I'll be talking a little about that today.
Lovely. Hi, everybody. My name is Julia. I'm a professor of international and intercultural management at Hochschule Fresenius here in Berlin. The first time I met the IDG was in 2021 when I was invited to co-facilitate the EU laboratory of how the U theory can be overlapped or combined with the IDGs, and it was such a new world to dive into and to hold space for the EU commissioners to understand the gravity of it. Since then, I got myself involved with the research circle of the IDG, higher education circle of the IDG, which I am now co-leading together with Viviana Iscarion, and we are doing a lot of work to give this space and place for the academics, admins, university vice rectors to collaborate together, to inspire one another, and to see what works and what doesn't. And this is exactly what I'm going to talk about later after a gentleman, and then we will invite you to a special discussion to give you the full perspective of that. Thank you very much for the invitation.
So, Bettina, thank you so much for inviting us. We are very excited to talk about our approach to the IDG, and we are very excited to have Julia with us, and we decided to give her room for her own talk later on. So today she will just announce the next talk and help with question and answer section. And we actually prepared a little presentation. If you're interested, I can send it to you later, Bettina, and you can contribute it to people who are interested in that. I will now share it. Hope that is functioning well. Hope everyone is seeing that. Yeah, my colleague Brigitte Peter and I stumbled upon the inner development goals when we were working with students in a project called Learning for Future. It was about how should the curricula at the university be so that students can bring their own things to the street, the things they are passionate about. For example, working against climate change. How should the curricula in university be to enable them to be change agents? And we stumbled upon the IDG. We worked with them. We were totally fascinated by how the students answered to that and reacted to that. It was a very moving experience. A lot of them were really profoundly touched by working with that. So we decided to go on with that. We later on get funding for a small project to develop a learning cycle for the IDG. We'll talk about that a little later. But before we come to that, first maybe some words to the IDG and what they are. You probably all know the SDG, the goals that were defined by the United Nations and adopted by the UN Assembly in 2015. 17 goals set for the year 2030, but as you all know, we are not very far with that. Actually, some of the goals we just have 17 to 19% achieved now that half of the time is over. The implementation is lagging far behind. So the people who came across the IDG developed them, we're seeing that political, technological development, legal frameworks, things like that are not enough. There's always the thing we can call the knowledge action gap, and more knowledge doesn't help to leap about the knowledge action gap, or at least not alone. So something different is needed, and that was a starting point to develop the inner development goals, actually, for some reason. And Olaf.
Yes. And while the inner development goal framework was developed, people found that they were kind of spread between 5 dimensions, which are, I just read them out quickly: being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see that there's in total 23 different inner development goals that have been defined, following the question, what's lacking in order to close this knowledge action gap? And it was very interesting to see that qualities such as inner compass, integrity, self-awareness, appreciation, connected, humility, that these were qualities that were found to be needed in order to move the process forward, always asking the question, what do we need in order to enable this actual change? And I think we'll be talking about the different dimensions later on to give a better example, because right now it would be just reading them out loud. So if we go to the next slide, how to work with the IDGs. As we've seen, there's a lot of different of them, and it's not about just working them through like in a test, ticking them box by box, but it's really about the practical outcome. So they are intended to empower individuals and groups in order to act. And the starting point is usually the questions, where do the individual organizations stand and where would they like to go? And only then the question follows, which IDGs or which skills and attitudes that are related to the IDGs should be developed above all. And so that individuals and organizations can act effectively. So it's not about just focusing on the outcome, but what do we need in order to get there and develop these skills and attitudes. And these dimensions that I've just mentioned, they also have an orientation. So it really goes from the inside, the being component, via thinking, relationship, cooperation, to action, and so to speak, to the outside. Yeah, I think we can move to the next. Yeah.
So Olaf told a little bit about the structure of the dimensions. Actually, when we just began working with them, we are not so much theoretically involved with the IDG. We're just practitioners. And when we began working with the IDG, we usually work with activists, for example, people who are active against climate change or against or for democracy, preservation of democracy. And what we noticed is that when we came to them with the IDG, they tended to focus on the acting dimension because they wanted to act, to get into action soon, to change things. And sometimes a little bit not thinking about the being and relating dimensions because they were so action focused. And while working with them, we found out that it's very important to also keep in mind the other qualities, the other skills of the IDG, and that they complement each other quite well if you look at all of them. So what fascinated us about the IDG, first of all, that's what the IDG organization states and found out, and I think the research going on by all the researchers worldwide, Julia can talk about that later on, is they are developable. So you can learn them in a way. What really is meant by learning, we can discuss a lot bit about, but they're not just given, like humility or maybe courage. They're not just given, you can develop them. So it's a good thing to have an approach to training the IDG. The next thing was they are tangible and appealing. A lot of the normal concepts in that field are a little bit just cognitive, very abstract things, and especially younger people or other people do not really relate to them very well. But the IDG are very relatable. We had students working with them, and all of them found other IDGs interesting, but all of them kind of really easily found a connection to them. So they are tangible and very appealing, and we worked with them, with students, but also with activists, and all of them found something in them to bring them further in their own things, working for transformation. They also combine interdisciplinary findings on how people take action: brain research, environmental psychology, organization development. Like Julia already mentioned, Otto Scharmer, Siri Yu. You can also find things at Hartmut Rosa and a lot of other people. So they are interdisciplinary, and that also fascinated us about them. We think they are not a competitor for education for sustainable development. There's a lot of good competence models out there, and we think that the IDG complement them. They are not a competitor, but they complement them because they are not just cognitive, they also appeal to a lot of other things. They are increasingly being applied in practice, for example, by the Stockholm School of Economics, Costa Rica, organizational development companies. I think also Google and IKEA apply them at the moment. And the research on them is ongoing. Julia is the best example for that because she coordinates a lot of the research. And so a lot of things are found out, and they are also flexible. One thing that really I found very interesting, they were developed at the beginning, especially in the global north. A lot of the actors were from the global north, like Scandinavia, Canada, US, but there's also an ongoing dialogue with people all around the world. For example, with Rwanda, they had some very, very interesting comments in the IDG and which IDG might be lacking. So they are very flexible and they want to go further in the research. And although developed for the field of sustainability, we think that they are applicable for all other fields of value oriented change process. We also already used them in discussions about leadership, so they are very broad, applicable too, and that was very, very fascinating for us. So our question was how to learn inner development goals. Have we go through all of them, 23 goals? Is there a set course of learning courage and another one for the other IDGs? We were thinking about that, and my colleague Brigitte and I, we both, and also Olaf, we both come from a background of humanist psychology, and we found a lot of the tools that we use in humanist psychology, so tools of self-awareness, self-experience, to be very useful to learn inner development goals. So we just applied for funding and developed it in a project, Get Active for Climate, Don't Just Want, Act. This was especially the Vila in Bonn in cooperation with Heinrich Böll Foundation in NRW and the Catholic Social Institute in Südburg. And we were funded by the Innofonds North Rhine-Westphalia. And we had roughly 1.5 year time to develop a curriculum, to test it. Olaf was in the group which we tested the thing first. And we found a lot of interesting things. And we actually wrote a book about it, which you can load down. It's free as a PDF at the Vila website. So how to learn inner compass. Characteristics like humility, presence, compassion, or courage cannot, we think, be learned like skills in school, like a language, for example. For us, it's about gaining experience and getting to the bottom of your own concepts, thoughts, and feelings about, let's say, courage. And this has a lot to do with not just thinking, but also sensing. And that's why focusing and also Gestalt therapy, the concepts my colleague and I were working from, seem to be very good tools to help with that. The IDG idea is based on the fact that individual and collective skills are needed in order to take joint social action. So we first have to find out something about ourselves to get into action. And we also found that the individual and collective aspects of the IDG complement each other very well. When people discuss about their individual inner development goals, the things they need, it also helps with their with the things they do as a group, and the other way around. And the other thing I already said, they have an orientation. Although they begin in the inside, they are aimed to go to the outside, to action. And we found that a lot, especially activists, let's say in climate change, tend to go to the action side first, but that it's very helpful to get them back and to think again about how can we get there? What do we need, for example, in being or relating to help us really do the things in action reliable and sustainable. So the question was, what kind of curricula could we do? We didn't want to do something that is focusing on the individual inner development goals. So instead of that, we tried to find a kind of a learning cycle. And actually, we didn't invent it. I will talk about it later on where we got the things from. But the idea was asking the people, what do you need for the things you want to do now, like climate activists? You have a certain project, you have to do things to bring them further, and what do you need? And the first step in the 4 to 5 curriculum is always asking, where are you standing now? And what person do you want to be? Or what kind of project do you want to have when you look back and it was successful? So in the 4 to 5 week curricula, we start with some kind of introspection about who you want to be and what you want to achieve in the world and what is already there. And we then go on through different stages. The first thing we always look at is obstructive beliefs. So not really resistance in the outward world, but within you. And looking at kinds of resistance within us actually is quite helpful for people to just acknowledge what kind of obstructive beliefs they have and how to handle them. We then go on to, although you have those obstructive beliefs, why do you start doing some things? And then we look at learning resources people already have, at role models, some kinds of biography work. The next step in the process is always obstacles in the world. So when we looked at the obstructive inner things before, we now look at the things that are happening in the world. What hinders you to do the things you want to do? And at that point, we look at the reaction tendencies. Within our biography, we all learn certain modes of dealing with stress. Normally, one is the primary mode of dealing with stress. And it's very helpful for people to look at that because They can find out, do I fight? Do I run away? Do I just freeze? Or have I other strategies? And how are they learned, for example, in the family system? Because the same things that help us deal with stress sometimes, and that's the next thing of the cycle, lead to a crisis. The things we already found useful in the past may be the things that leads us into a crisis if that we do them too much. If the world around us changes, we can't just do the same thing. We have to change the pattern, and this is the lowest point of the learning cycle, where people don't know what to do because the usual strategies they use don't work, so they have to do something else. And during the 4 to 5 day curriculum, we try to have a small look at least at the things they usually do and how they can change it. And after that, it's about learning the new pattern, integrating it to the things we usually do, and getting back to normal life. How can we apply things we learned about ourselves? And what are the next 3 steps to integrating a new strategy into our approach to the world? So, as you can see, it's a big thing, and we didn't invent it ourselves, although we try to better it by using all kinds of findings from learning psychologists. But actually, our inspiration was the Harry's journey, first done by Campbell and later on by Rebillot. So a kind of description of how inner development works. Actually, it was originally conceptualized as a narrative cycle, but it's also a cycle of how people grow, how inner development goes on. And we use that as a framework to apply the IDG. At this different stages, we always ask, okay, what IDG you need now, and what can we do to give you some hint of the IDG that you need on your next step of the journey. For us, it's very important that you don't have to do the whole cycle. You can just take out some of the steps and, for example, just leap over the crisis by just strengthening resources you already have. You're using methods like the Zurich resource model, for example, to find out what are your strengths, what IDG do you need next, and how can we strengthen it to help you with the endeavors you're working on. For us, it was very important to have something that is applicable to all kinds of situations, for practitioners to just pick out some things of the things we developed. We used a lot of the resources of the IDG organization, but we also developed own training methods and described them in our manual. And this is the point where I give over to Olaf, because he did exactly that. He used some of the things we developed and took from the IDG website and used it in his own way.
Yeah. So last year I did a talk and a workshop within the Porza Climate Week, which was organized by Climate Action Group working for a better climate in Köln, Ports and beyond. And when I got in touch with them and they told me what this whole week is about, what they are doing, and they found out about the IDGs, they were interested in some kind of collaboration. And then, as we already mentioned beforehand, we started with the questions, where are you and where would you like to go? And as, thanks, Martin. So regarding the question where they are in the moment, it was a group of very committed individuals trying to live more climate friendly and also inspire more of their community to do so as well. At the same time, they're constantly being confronted with global developments, climate change, war, etc., and the knowledge action gap regarding what we collectively should be doing and concentrating on instead of wasting our energies and resources in other fields. And so the question regarding how could we work together was, how can we stay motivated and healthy despite constantly facing obstacles? And what we did was, first we had 2 sessions. It was a brief keynote introducing the inner development goals, basically what we did in the beginning right now. And then we had a 3-hour workshop. And as Martin just said, like the whole circle, which was inspired by the Heron's journey, we did this in the Train the Trainer project for 4 to 5 days. So having a workshop of 3 hours, we really had to break it down. And how I started was by working or asking the people, how does successful commitment and engagement actually feel? And what I used was a method called focusing from humanist psychology, which is basically, I don't know if you guys know about Hartmut Rosa's resonance theory, who talks a lot about how does resonance function? How is it possible we enter a room and we get the sense of the room? Do I feel comfy or not comfortable? He describes all of it, but doesn't really tell how to apply it. And this is what we, for instance, find in focusing. So what I did with the people was finding a situation which felt very meaningful to them, where they had a sense that what they're actually putting their energy in gets them some kind of output. And then it's not just thinking about it, but also trying to get a sense, how does it feel in the body, which emotions come with it, because it makes the whole experience more vivid. And this can function as a motivator to keep the motivation and also resilience high in phases where they meet obstacles. The second thing we did was facing obstacles with the IDGs, which was an exercise I just took out from the workbook designed by Martin and Brigitte. And this was like kind of imaginary hike exercise where people in the beginning, they could see all the 23 inner development goals, and they were instructed to find a hard situation they're facing at the moment. And then they should reflect on which IDGs may be helpful in order to move further in their processes. And then it was designed in a way that they have a hiking bag and they put all these qualities in, and then they have to hike a mountain, and along the way they find it's too heavy to carry all with them, and then they come to a spot where they get food and they trade one of the IDGs for the food in order to find out which IDG would they take up to the top, in order to find out which is the most important one, which can't I get rid of beforehand. And then the last exercise was in order to foster their resilience through self-regulation. Another exercise from focusing grounding called grounding into being there. And what I found interesting in this whole experience working with this group and also implying the IDGs was that it wasn't necessary to just focus on the IDGs all the time, because when I thought about what exercises or explorations may be helpful for the people, and the other two that aren't coming from the IDGs, from the workbook directly, there are a lot of IDGs that are also trained and fostered by these methods we already have within humanist psychology and psychotherapy, such as raising self-awareness, presence, empathy, meaning making, humility, and trust. And this is also a bridge to the next slide. Thanks, Martin. Which kind of gives a summary how to practice the IDGs, or at least how we understand practicing them, which is a very holistic approach to it. And also that it goes via head and gut, that it's about methods that motivate people to feel perceive their thoughts, but also body sensations, and to take what we have in humanist psychology, which in my experience as a psychologist is often very different in what we find in other approaches, just really trying to I don't have the words yet, but my hands are already saying it, like um, helping people grow with their whole
Empowerment?
being. Sorry?
Empowerment?
Empowerment is related to it, but it's like, carrying them forward, I'd say. Yeah. And often small exercises can be enough to make this possible. And this is also what I experienced working with this group. We just had a keynote of 30, 45 minutes and then a 3 hours workshop, but it already gave the people a sense of what kind of exercises they could also try to implement into their daily life in order to stay more resilient and also to gain meaning from the successes they've already done. Because what we find often in people who are very engaged, they, as Martin said earlier, they directly jump to the action part, they act, they burn out, and they don't even allow themselves maybe to cherish what they've already accomplished. And this is very strong source we found that we want to give people access to also have a connection with that.
Yeah. If I may interrupt at that point, we also had the experience that just writing down the obstructive belief, why can't I do something that hinder us, and let them be read out by someone else to me, or has a very profound effect on people. Hearing the inner monologue as a outer kind of dialogue sometimes brings people forward to say, okay, what kind of things I believe about myself? And then we give them tools to deal with that, like, for example, the works by Byron Katie. So sometimes very small things within a bigger framework help to really get along practically, and that's what people also said to us when reflecting on the different courses we've done. So actually, that's it. If you're interested in our manual, you can freely download it on the website of the Vila Bonn. We also have a small podcast on different issues of the IDG. Maybe some of you want to be a guest in our podcast. We would be very interested in that and talk about it with you. And if you're further interested, you can find us there. And actually, yeah.
One last remark would just pop to mind for me, because coming from psychology and studying it for quite some years, and at the same time experiencing myself as a quite engaged person in society, I often found this kind of limbo. Where do we need to start in order to change something? Because I found a lot of approaches in psychology like, you just need to change yourself and then everything else around you will change too. There's some truth to that. And then I was also exposed to a lot of people who didn't really see the necessity to kind of heal their own wounds, or like things we all have experienced, which, for instance, developed destructive beliefs about ourselves, which were just focusing on the societal structures. And so it was always left or right, right or left. And what I find so beautiful about the inner development goal framework, that it says we have to change collectively, we have to change structures and the system to some way, but we also have to change ourselves. And it really builds this bridge between two very different perspectives that I was struggling with a lot in the last 10 to 15 years. So this was a huge relief to find the system. And so this is just what I wanted to add.
I can't agree more, because this is one of the topics that's always raised by the participants to say, okay, myself or the group, and we say both at the same time. By working on yourself, you can change a group, and by working on your group, you can change yourself, and that's what I really love about the IDG. And now, thank you for listening, and I give to Julia for some remarks to announce her own talk in the future.
Yeah, this is such a beautiful bridge, and thank you very much for your presentation. I really like the deep dive into the topic, and I really love the illustrations. Whoever did that, say my regards to them. Yeah, so I wanted to bring a couple of the ideas that in order to bring this change on a global level, we need a global commitment, a global activism, global agency, and something unprecedented happens. More than 300 hubs all over the world popped up within the first 3 years since the IDG was announced as a framework. So you can see people are gathering together in a specific localizations, in the local spaces, and try to understand, okay, what can I do? How can I help? How can we contribute? How can we collaborate? So these are the hubs and networks, and they can be local, or they can be thematic, or there can be circles. And the circles are, for now, as far as I know, only 4 circles that come from the IDG itself, not as a grassroots, the ones that I showed in the previous picture, but rather as a centrally aligned and organized idea. So I represent the IDG researchers and higher education circle, and you can see at the bottom right, Frederick and Viviana, who we lead this together. So what we do, we gather online monthly or bi-monthly, and we try to connect and give space to people like Martin, to people like Olaf, who show what they do, who inspire others to think, how can I implement this? How it can be co-created? How it can be, inspiring to work with my students, as Martin said, or to work with the psychology practitioners, or to work with academics. So now we have 1,114 members, and I already posted into the chat the link to join. In order to understand where is the ground on this, so we already said that the good research stands on the shoulders of the practitioners. So we try to see where we can understand the papers that already focus on IDGs. So we created the list of publications, and we see that there is sustainability, climate change, well-being, social frameworks, in leadership, education, pedagogy, transformation. So you can see how much of the research has been already published. So I created this print screen in May. Today we are in July, and we are 4,400 citations. That means that this is academically interesting, appealing, and people try to read more, to understand more, to apply more. As we are a space to connect, so we can see then who are the key researchers who are moving the IDG forward, and that's how we can connect, and that's how we can see, okay, who are the people who are studying psychology, sociology, sustainability, environment, but also philosophy, but also education, but also transformative learning, and see which are the spheres that are moving forward quicker and where we can learn from. So for this reason, we are connecting, we're gathering the papers, but we also do the bigger facilitation event. So this one was a part of the IDG summit last year, and Frederick, the one who you can see on the right, was facilitating this, was head of facilitation of 25 facilitators on the topic of the education. You can see the tables over here. Each table was appointed to a specific topic. For example, the IDG for youth, the IDG for female education, the IDG for corporate education. I was leading the one on the IDG for business schools, because this is where my own research focuses. And when we understood that there are so many cases like Olaf and Martin was showing today to us, we understood that we need to record them, to publish them, to gather them so that other people know and could read about it. And that's why we created the collaboration with the Agile Journal of Skills Development, which is going to publish the first ever case book of implementing the implementing the IDGs into higher education, which I am honored to edit. Now we have finished the peer review process. We are now into the editing and really, really hoping that it's going to be released maybe to the Day of the Knowledge, the 1st of September, hopefully. So this is where I would want to invite you to come and learn the cases around the world. So you can see 29 countries and 55 institutions around the world have submitted the proposals. And in the first issue, we already have 7 cases peer-reviewed and going to be published. So it is my pleasure to invite you all. If you want to join as a peer reviewer, as a participant of the circle, you already have the link in the chat box. And I only want to say that it is my role here is to create a space to showcase the connection. So, for example, Bettina reached me out saying that there is the beautiful work that Martin and Olaf are doing. So our space is to show this co-creation and make ourselves stronger so that we could hope for a little bit better world during our lifetimes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I would stop sharing stopping the recording here that we are discussing openly. But first, thank you to all the speakers, Martin, Olaf, and Julia, and the links will be shared. Thank you so much.